Expressing friendship laced with criticism, U.S. President Joe Biden is calling for Israel to take steps to lower tensions with the Palestinians and for Saudi Arabia to move toward normalization with Israel. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
In a far-ranging foreign policy interview with CNN's Fareed Zakaria, President Biden said that the collapse of the PA has opened the door to Palestinian extremism, but also that Israel must moderate its policies.
The fact that the Palestinian Authority has lost its credibility, not necessarily because of what Israel's done, just because it's just lost its credibility, number one. And number two, created a vacuum for extremism among the Palestinians. The PLA, there's some very extreme elements. So it's not all Israel now in the West Bank, all Israel's problem, but they are part of the problem. And particularly those individuals in the cabinet who say they have no right, we can settle anywhere we want, they have no right to be here, etc.
Biden called on Prime Minister Netanyahu to halt judicial reform and rein in what he called extremists in his cabinet.
Hopefully, Bibi will continue to move toward moderation and changing the court. Bibi, I think, is trying to work through how we can work through his existing problems in terms of his coalition. I'm one of those who believes that Israel's ultimate security rests in a two-state solution. I think it's a mistake to think that, as some members of his cabinet, and this is one of the most extreme members of cabinets that I've seen. I go all the way back to Golda Meir.
As for a possible Israeli-Saudi normalization deal, Biden was encouraging.
It depends upon the conduct and what is asked of us for them to recognize Israel. Quite frankly, I don't think they have much of a problem with Israel.
Turning to Ukraine, Biden said that the U.S. may eventually have a security relationship with the country like it has with Israel.
The United States would be ready to provide, while the process was going on, and it's going to take a while that process is going on, to provide security a la the security we provide for Israel, providing the weaponry, the capacity to defend themselves.
So we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. And joining us now with more on the CNN interview with U.S. President Joe Biden is Gil Hoffman, Executive Director of Honest Reporting. Gil, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Lita.
So Biden had some harsh words for Israel. You know, why go on national television and air out such grievances against a U.S. ally? What is Biden hoping to achieve here?
President Biden is the opposition leader of Netanyahu. With all due respect to Lapid, the main pressure on Netanyahu to balance out the extreme elements in his government comes from the President of the United States. Netanyahu can tell Ben Gvir and Smotrich, excuse me, we don't live on an island here. This is the president who is complaining about what I'm doing. He's not inviting me to Washington. He's inviting President Herzog instead. We need for the Israeli economy and for Israeli diplomacy and to make peace with Saudi Arabia to get along with the President of the United States. And so with all due respect to those who said that this is criticism, it's harsh and hurts Netanyahu, it helps him tremendously.
It helps him tremendously. And what about, you know, what Biden said about the Saudis, that they don't have a problem with Israel, but that normalization is still a long ways off? This is in contrast to Israeli reports that we could see a normalization deal within the year. Biden wants a foreign policy win. Netanyahu wants a foreign policy win, but it doesn't seem like this will be it.
You know, it's interesting because when President Biden says that, it actually harms the Saudis because it makes them look like they're nitpicking and that they don't really have a problem with Israel when they're trying to be tough and say they want to get something for some kind of agreement. We've heard from Tzachi Hanegbi, the national security advisor, from Eli Cohen, the foreign minister, that the one who's actually preventing a deal from being reached is President Biden. That he's the one who has given conditions to the Saudis. He's under pressure from more progressive elements in his party who are still upset at MBS in Saudi Arabia for dismembering a journalist, which is, of course, a terrible thing to do, but still, they're taking that a lot more seriously in the Democratic Party than in other parts of the political spectrum in America, that President Biden hasn't been willing to accept the security demands that the Saudis are making that Israel was fine with. So and maybe the problem is him.
Now, going back to Biden's remark, his main focus was really on the conflict with the Palestinians, especially the violence in Judea and Samaria. He wants Israel to work with the Palestinian Authority. The cabinet took steps in that direction. But how much of an influence does Biden's opinion on that matter actually influence Netanyahu's decision-making, and why?
I think that the prime minister takes the president's words very seriously. It's interesting that the first cabinet meeting after the incursion of the IDF into Jenin last week deals with repairing Jenin, with the Palestinian Authority taking a central role in that. The Palestinian Authority has been overthrown in Jenin, just like they were in Gaza. Abbas is very weak right now. The fact that the first thing that Israel is doing after that operation is to strengthen Abbas and try to get him back in charge of Jenin is fascinating. And there's no doubt that America played a central role in that happening. And so with all due respect to words back and forth, the government that was formed by Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir is taking steps to strengthen Abu Mazen. Who would have thought that that would happen 6 months ago? And it doesn't matter that one abstained and one voted against. It's happening.
And yet, after reminding of his decades-long relationship and friendship with Israeli leaders, he did speak of the extremists, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, in the current Israeli cabinet. Does he expect Netanyahu to somehow realign his coalition? And isn't this maybe perhaps interference in an internal Israeli matter?
The United States always interferes in internal matters. The outgoing ambassador Naid spoke at an event yesterday, and he spoke very openly about having his opinions on what steps Israel should take and what he had been pushing to do in his time here. To me, it sounded like President Biden was empathizing with Netanyahu when he talked about the extremists there. He knows that there's very little that Netanyahu could do about it right now. He wasn't slamming Israel for having the most extreme government since Golda Meir. He was feeling bad for Netanyahu to be stuck with these guys, and it allowed Biden to remind the world, like he has so many times, that he was friends with Golda, and I guess promoted the movie that's premiering at the Jerusalem Film Festival this Thursday.
All right, Gil Hoffman, thank you so much for your analysis, and stay with us because we'll have you on later to talk about the legal reform. And in other news, the Security Cabinet convened Sunday evening to vote on the future of the Palestinian Authority. The details in the following report.
By a majority of 8-1 and one abstention, the Security Cabinet decided on Sunday evening to adopt Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's draft decision to prevent the collapse of the Palestinian Authority. According to the decision, Israel will act to prevent the PA's collapse while demanding that it ceases its anti-Israel activity in the international legal diplomatic area, the incitement in the media and education system, the payments to families of terrorists and the murderers, and the illegal construction in Area C. Despite adopting the decision, the Security Cabinet did not elaborate on how it plans to prevent the collapse of the authority. Opposing the measures was National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, while Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich abstained from the vote. The Security Cabinet did unanimously support proposals to continue to take determined actions to amputate terrorism.